Horus was a failure and a fool, and incompetent, with all of the might of the title of War Master, with the 9 full legions at his beck and call, with the ability to send his greatest threats away to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, to denude his adversary of his greatest weapons. Still, he failed. He was defeated due to his hubris, his ignorance, his myopic concentration on toys, because he did not understand. With all of the forces of the legions, with his enemy outnumbered and outgunned, with the Emperor busy in the webway, still he failed. He played at rebellion, like a slighted son trying to prove himself to his daddy. He fought his war on the Emperor's terms, and by the rules he had been taught by his father. What a fool. Abaddon continues this particular strain of stupidity that led to the defeat at Terra. He may have the support of the gods, but he is no less a puppet and fool than his father Lupercal. Incompetence seems to run in that particular line of the family. They do not understand. The war against the Emperor, the corpse god, the Imperium. It is not a war of weapons. It is a war of words. It is not a war of infantry, but of ideas. Not of materials, but of minds, of will. It is not the war of Horus. It is the war of the heart. So Abaddon will always fail. Fleets, formations, and forces. Ha! Petty princelings waving flags. Petty warriors strutting and striking at that which is of no import. It is a war of facts and the fibre of our galaxy. It is a war for the truth. The Emperor is indeed a god. None can now refute this. Not after the manifestation of the Emperor Angelic at benediction. But he is a young and feeble god. He is a god of lies. Mine are the 4 great powers who burn brighter than the myriad stars. I serve them all as I should, for they're the true future of humanity and the very galaxy itself. A galaxy of truth. This particular war is ours for the winning. For one to destroy a thing, you must understand a thing. The Ecclesiarchy, the Imperial Creed, is based on the Lectitio Divinatus, the work of my lord, the Golden One, the greatest of all Primarchs, Lorgar Aurelian. Hence I know it better than any who now festoon themselves with the raiment of holiness. I know its every sentence, psalm, and sentiment. Hence I turn this great weapon on its wielders. I can use it to destroy that which it was meant to elicit. Faith. I can use it as a gateway to the very hearts of those who live with its lies on their lips and in their hearts. Our Lord Lorgar was once viewed as the runt of the litter of demigods, the Primarchs. But in this war, in this struggle, he is the master, and I am his willing and enthusiastic tool. For this war will be won, not by the Astartes, not by the demon, not by the use of force. It will be won by he who controls the masses. It will be won by the deployment of truth. Now, let us put this into practice. I have taken my time on this world, I have sown the seeds. I have my most regal armor on, my most noble bearing. Now, time to reap the rewards, time to pluck the fruit, time to reap the harvest.
Welcome, 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 children of the Emperor, children of the light. Long have you heard of my coming. Long has it been in the coming. I, a true son of the Emperor, one of his holy warriors, his Astartes, one who has seen him in person, one who has spoken with him directly.
The fools. Am I not one of his angels of death, his space marines? In their childlike minds they believe I have spoken to the Emperor. The propaganda of the Imperium I turn to my cause. But I have seen him, have heard his voice 10 millennia ago. But it is not a lie. So in a way, I speak the truth.
I have heard your cause. Across the great void of time and space I have heard. Your lamentations at the rough treatment you have received. Your plight. It grieves me. It grieves the Emperor. And who is it that brings such woe on his fellow humans? Who is it that rules with the rod? Who is it that starves and burns and beats his brothers and sisters? Who is it that tells the children of the Emperor when you must work yourselves to the bone, when you must sacrifice all to his needs alone? Who? But who is this cardinal? Who is this person that oppresses my brothers and sisters so? Is he better than thee? Is he not a man? Is he not as we are? Does he breathe the same air as us? Does he sleep as we do? Does he not eat as we do? Well, of course, he does eat better. Who is this man? For he is just a man, to rule you so harshly. Who is this man who would dictate when you can eat, when you can sleep, when you can procreate? Look now at your pride and joy, your children. How many more would there be amongst this mighty congregation if not for him? How many fathers have forgone the pride of more sons? How many mothers the comfort of more daughters? He tells us when we can procreate. How dare he? And he does this in the Emperor's name? Does this sound like that which the Emperor would wish for his children? Does it? And he does this in the Emperor's name. I say nay. If it were within his power, this tyrant would tell us when we could defecate, when we could shit. Well, while we are on shit, let us identify where the largest river of shit flows from. It comes from the mouth of the Cardinal. It comes from his writ. It comes from his pride, his greed, and his envy of you. It comes from his warped and twisted heretical soul. So, true children of the Emperor, will we stand for this? Will we allow this slave master to rule us? Will we betray our Emperor, our Lord, our God? Do you truly believe the Emperor wishes we live on our knees? Does he wish us to be slaves? So, true brothers, sisters, children of the Emperor, are we going to stomach this tyrant? Or are we going to depose this filth, this twisted pontiff of pain? Will we rise up in the Emperor's name? Will we march from this place? Will we break down the doors of his palace? Will we take the fire of the Emperor to this tyrant? Let us bring holy absolution to the Cardinal, in the Emperor's name. Let us be about it. We must kill the unclean tyrant in his very palace of lies. Kill! Kill! Kill!
I have awoken the beast. I have enraged it. I have directed it, and I have let it loose. Now to follow the throng on their way to the palace, where it will pour over the walls, through the gates, and swarm the meagre defenders. The Cardinal's personal guard will make ribbons of these people, but that is why I am going myself. I'm an Astartes after all. I will tear them to pieces and take my prize. I have plans for the Cardinal. This world is now mine. Do you see Abaddon? Do you see Horus? This is how this war is fought. This is how it is won. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the forces and factions of the Warhammer 40k universe. Today, let us explore possibly the greatest threat to the Imperium. Many will balk at this and state that I should say the raising of the Necrons, or the arrival of the Great Devourer. Alas, I deem these to be the greatest threats to the galaxy, to the entire setting, but this faction, who worship the dark powers of chaos, I judge to be the greatest threat to the Imperium of man. So, let us explore the very basics of the 17th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, the denizens Sicaris, the Word-Bearers. The Word-Bearers are unlike most of their fellow Chaos Traitor Legion compatriots, as they have never given their fealty to any one dark god of chaos, for theirs is a true devotion to chaos in all of its myriad guises. Not for them the love of bloody slaughter, the need for licentious cavorting, the enigmas of change, or bilious buboes. To the Word-Bearers, these are equal parts of the whole, and none more important than any other. Theirs is a total and utter immersion in the concept of chaos. They do not follow it due to the license or reward that it gives. They do so because they agree with it in its entirety and see it as the universal and fundamental truth of existence. This gives them a purpose that is beyond what they consider the childish self-indulgent goals of their comrades. To them, the worship of chaos is reward unto itself. It is a goal, not a means to an end. This makes them far more sinister and dangerous than the direct and predictable legions that lord force of arms or simple might. They are calculating and ardent in their beliefs. The Word-Bearers are the diametric opposition to the Ecclesiarchy, Sisters of Battle, Inquisition, and Black Templars. They are a shattered image of everything they were intended to be when they were forged by the Emperor, the master of mankind. How they have fallen. But worse, they are considered by most to be the chink in the armor, the cuckoo in the nest that led the Warmaster Horus Lupercal to his spiral down to treachery, and through him a full half of the legions of the Astartes, the Space Marines, and vast swathes of the military and navy. Of all of the forces of the gods of chaos, it is the Word-Bearers that are the most complicit, zealous, and pure followers, if that word can even be used appropriately in this context. For the word-bearers are as close to unadulterated evil as is possible, and can only even be considered to be matched by Urian Rakath and Asdrubal Vecht, the twisted master of the dark city of Cormorah and all of its denizens. It is at the feet of the word-bearers and their Primarch Lorgar that can be placed the horror of the Horus Heresy, the death of the Primarchs Ferrus Manus, Magnus, Alfarius, Sanguinius, and Horus. They are responsible for the shattering of the legions of Titans, reducing the Imperium of Man to a shadow of its former glory, the destruction of the Emperor's Webway project, the death of his best friend and only confidant, Malkador, and the crippling and subsequent interment of the Emperor into the Golden Throne. It is this legion, this faction, that is more responsible for the grim, hopeless darkness of the 41st millennium than any other. For though some have contributed or built on the work started by these fiends, it is they who took the reins of the pathway to an age of human enlightenment, security, and prosperity, and guided them into the terror of its present predicament, its present course. The word-bearers are the very epitome of cold, callous, calculated, and unrepenting and unrelenting evil that has ever issued from the human race. They are horrors. But it was not always so. Once the 17th Legion were called the Imperial Heralds, and were the most fanatically devout and loyal of all legions. When the Master of Mankind, the Emperor, finally threw off the shroud of secrecy he had employed since the dawn of history, he did so with one goal, one purpose alone: to save humanity. But not only from the predations and thraldom of psychers, demagogues, and xenos, what the Imperium call aliens, but also from religion, superstition, ignorance, and fear. So the Emperor set to conquering the cradle of humanity, Terra, which we presently call Earth. It was a hellhole of techno-barbarian fiefdoms that waged relentless war on one another. Hope was in short supply, and only the strong survived. The Emperor forged an army of transhuman soldiers, his Astartes, his Space Marines. They were to be 20 legions of these mighty warriors, whose skills far outstripped those of normal humans. They were resilient, strong, intelligent, and mentally supple, their reactions fast enough to match the swiftest of Xenos that stalked the galaxy. They were humans at start, but would then be altered and enhanced, augmented in multiple ways, so that they could not only survive the war-torn landscape of the grim darkness of the future, but could thrive and then dominate it. Hence did the Emperor begin the conflagration known only as the Unification Wars. Each of his legions was designed and raised for differing purposes, but all were capable of unfettered war. His 17th Legion, the Imperial Heralds, were taken from the sons of his enemies. Each of the recruits was taken from the families of defeated warlords and officers who had once opposed the Emperor's rule. They were raised on a diet of guilt, as they would be constantly bombarded with the dire deeds of their sires. Then they would be infused with a knowledge of the Emperor's mercy, his magnanimity, and raised to believe that they owed him unquestioning loyalty to atone for the sins of their fathers. Thus were they ever the most zealous of the legions of the Astartes, the Space Marines, for there is no more ardent adherent of a cause than the converted who have been shown the light. The heralds were thus named, as it would be they who would deliver the message of the Emperor to any recalcitrant and resisting population, outpost, or nation. So many times the Legion would be ordered to send the one Marine, clothed in black livery and wielding a winged mace in his hand and a skull-faced helm. This dark omen of doom would relay the only terms the Emperor would ever offer, with scant exceptions only: unconditional surrender or annihilation. The heralds were known to be fanatically devout to the tenet of the imperial truth, the doctrine that there was no God, no spirit, no mysticism, and no soul. All religion was a threat to humanity, to be fought against and destroyed with as much zeal as any external enemy. For more details, please listen to my entry on the Sisters of Battle. The heralds soon became known as the Iconoclasts. as when a nation or civilization was defeated, they would scour it of all documents, books, databases, or structures that were contrary to the imperial truth. Statues of devotion would be torn down, churches razed to the ground, and any priest or other clergy that would not repent of their faiths were put to the sword or burned at the stake. They were the very bane of anything that contradicted the imperial truth, and were tirelessly diligent in their prosecution of this mandate, and the persecution of any who would not let go of their previous beliefs. When Terra was finally dominated, the Great Crusade was launched. The Emperor's legions were increasing in size exponentially as his resources grew, drawing on the terrain he had already dominated and then forming an alliance with the inhabitants of Mars, the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Great Crusade saw his armies and fleets explode into the galaxy and lay claim to everything and everywhere. The Great Crusade's purpose: to free and reunite all of the lost tribes of humanity and bring to them the imperial truth and safety, security and prosperity. To forge a new golden era of human ascendancy. As the crusade went out into the galaxy, the lost Primarchs were discovered one by one. The Primarchs I will cover in more detail very soon, but in brief, they were the genetic template from which all of his legions were drawn. He had 20 Primarchs, 21 if you include the twins who were to lead the 20th Legion, to match his 20 legions. They were demigods, with abilities eclipsing the standard Marine as far as the Marine did humanity. These Titans were to lead his armies and make the crusade unstoppable. Each legion had its speciality, as too did the Primarchs of the legions. When the Primarch of the Imperial Heralds was finally located, it was a time of fundamental change for his legion, as it was with many discoveries. But Lorgar Aurelian, known on his homeworld of Colchis as the Golden One, was their Primarch. He had some psychic or psyker abilities. He foretold the coming of the Emperor in a dream, so he had, like most of his brothers, risen to take command of his entire world. But unlike many of his brothers, he did so not only by force, but out of religious fervor. The culture of Colchis was emphatically religious, and he had raised his own banner and cult and then dominated all. For he was a Primarch, and his natural skill at war and domination was hardwired into his very genetic makeup. He unified his world through his preaching, but then with his martial talents. When the Emperor arrived and reclaimed his son, he gave command of the 17th Legion to Lorgar. But perhaps the Emperor erred, for he did not spend as much time with Lorgar as he had with many of his newfound sons, and did not notice the difference in this golden child. For Lorgar was informed of the imperial truth, but felt that it was a test. He could not purge the need for faith that had been instilled in him by his upbringing on Colchis. He believed with every fibre of his being, his mind, body and soul, that the Emperor was placing down a test that only he had passed. Of all of his brother Primarchs, Lorgar believed that he had seen through the veil and discerned that his father, the master of mankind, was in fact a god. The Emperor's constant and very vocal denial of this title, this truth, was but another test. Lorgar then went about changing the iconoclasts and reforging them in his image. Lorgar was often claimed to be the runt of the litter by his brother Primarchs, as he did not seem as martially talented as either a duelist, a general, or admiral. He was far more adept than any human had ever been, for he was a Primarch, but he never seemed to shine as his brothers did. But his skills were very specific indeed. He was a philosopher, orator, and writer of prodigious skill, far surpassing that of his brothers. He quickly converted even the stalwart and fanatically loyal adherents of the imperial truth, the entire 17th Legion of iconoclasts, to his ways of thinking. They were his gene sons, to be certain, so they would always have taken what he had to say easier than others. But his arguments, his force of personality, and his oratory was so powerful that the Legion was soon transformed into a force of religious zealots who proclaimed the Emperor as a living god and the deity of humanity. Lorgar renamed his Legion the Word-Bearers. Alas, even this signal was missed by the Emperor. He did not know what his son was about, and what his Legion then went on to do. The word-bearers, with Lorgar at their head, then went on to partake in the crusade. But to cut an exceptionally long story short, they moved forward at a snail's pace compared to any other legion. With the galaxy to dominate, this was untenable. The word-bearers would tarry endlessly on those worlds that they had conquered. At that time, none in the Imperial administration, even the Emperor, knew why. Hence it was that the Emperor sent investigators to fathom the reasons that the word-bearers seemed so inept. What they discovered shook them to the core. When the 17th had conquered, they then went about converting the entire population of worlds to the unquestioning faith in the Emperor's divinity. They would burn and tear down all religious centers and information as they had previously done, but they would then install their new faith in its place. If any resisted or refuted the new religion, they would be exterminated. The pyres and massed graves that were left in the wake of the word-bearers were shocking. More than this, they then tasked all of their conquered worlds to erect huge cathedrals to the worship and veneration of the God Emperor of mankind. Lorgar had penned a testament, an incredibly powerful book that was called Lectitio Divinitatis. It was compelling and required reading on all of his dominated worlds. The use of the resources of entire worlds and systems to the glory of the Emperor instead of the furtherance of the crusade was deemed astonishingly wasteful and in direct contravention to the Emperor's most important diktat, the imperial truth. When all of this came to light, the Emperor sent his most trusted aide, the legendary Malcador the Sigillite, and another Primarch, Reboot Guilliman, along with his entire legion, the Ultramarines, to teach Lorgar and the word-bearers a lesson. On the world of Kur, the word-bearers had the populace create what Lorgar deemed to be the perfect city, Monarchia. Its every street was festooned with religious iconography. On its every corner stood a mighty, beautiful edifice to the worship of the Emperor. To Lorgar, it was a paradise of perfection. The Ultramarines gave the city a period of grace and ordered its every inhabitant to evacuate. When the time period was over, they destroyed it. It is said that no two stones were left standing together. Lorgar's dream was reduced to nothing, to ashes. The word-bearers were summoned back to Monarchia by the inhabitants of Kur. As soon as this began, Lorgar was expecting to find an alien fleet in orbit, as he had been told that the world was under fire. His shock at finding the Ultramarines' vessels was shattering. Thinking that his brother Guilliman had lost his senses, Lorgar's confusion was unfathomable. He geared up toward war, thinking his brother, Reboot, mad. It was then that he was instructed to go to the surface of the world, to array his entire legion on the outskirts of Monarchia. The order came directly from Malcador, so it had the force of the Emperor behind it, and Lorgar knew that. When he did so, he saw that his perfect city had been destroyed and flew into a rage. He actually struck Malcador, the man all of the Primarchs referred to as Uncle due to his age and connection to their father, the Emperor. He was about to tear into the Ultramarines and his own brother, Reboot Guilliman, when Malcador summoned the Emperor himself. The Emperor arrived as a psychic projection. He spoke with Lorgar and, with incredible harshness, chided and castigated him in front of his entire legion, which the Emperor had psychically forced to kneel. Over 100,000 Astartes, Space Marines, forced to kneel just by the Emperor's willing it. And this was all done in front of Reboot Guilliman's Ultramarines. The Emperor informed Lorgar and his legion that they had failed him. They had been ignorant and arrogant, and had foisted a mad and wrong belief system on fellow humans and at the end of a gun. Even then, Lorgar still could not accept that he was wrong. He even tried to reason with the Emperor, attempting to tell him he had passed the test and saw the Emperor's godhead. This evoked a harsh rebuttal from the Emperor. In this instant, Lorgar was broken. His god had told him he was no god. His god had told him that all of his efforts were wasted, and that every construct on every world that he had built would be torn down, as the iconoclasts of old would have done. The people that would not be reconditioned to the imperial truth would be erased, as Lorgar's legion had erased those who had refused to convert. Lorgar was inconsolable. He went back to the crusade, but with no heart. He went into seclusion and was rarely seen. He was shattered. From there, one of his old teachers from Colchis, one that had been recruited into the World Bearers when Lorgar had been discovered, began to manipulate him. For the full story of this we must wait for another time, for it would be criminal to gloss over this point in brief. Just know that the old teachers, Corferon and Erebus, were of the old faith, not really Lorgar's new one. They were the snakes in the grass that dripped poison in Lorgar's ear whilst he was at his most vulnerable. They worshipped old and powerful beings that they said would accept the veneration and love that Lorgar so abundantly needed to give. And so Lorgar became the first of the Primarchs to fall to the worship of chaos. As stated, one day we shall follow the path of descent of Lorgar reeling into evil, but today is not that day. The tragedy of all of this is that while Lorgar fell to chaos and went on a pilgrimage to the Eye of Terror, which I'll explain anon, his own testament, the Lectitio Divinitatis, swept over the Imperium, and cults of emperor worship arose as he fell. A sad tale indeed. For it is this very book, the Lectitio Divinitatis, that has led to the state of the Imperium of the 41st millennium. Ironic. But it was never just the effect of his fall, it was its manner. Lorgar had ever been utterly without mercy or pity or restraint in dealing with any who did not hold his worldview. Before, it could be justified and accepted by his father and his brothers, as he seemed to be working to a common goal, and few of them were any more even-handed as they believed that the crusade was righteous and needed to be done with all due haste to safeguard humanity. But few were ever as callous as Lorgar. Not really. As Lorgar descended into the worship of chaos, his callousness to even his own sons showed through, as he used them up in his dealings with warp entities. Even his own gene sons were nothing to him. Nothing and nobody mattered to Lorgar but his vision. A vision that was totally evil. Lorgar met the gods of chaos, the corrupting powers, then set about quietly and slowly spreading their vile creed across his worlds, his army, and eventually his own brothers. It was Lorgar that sent the arch-viper Erebus, one of the most hated characters in the entire Warhammer 40k's setting, to tempt and then corrupt the Warmaster, Horus Lupercal. For each of the word-bearers were like their gene father. They were not only skilled, but exceptionally innately talented at oration, argument, and conversion. They became the ultimate weapons of the ruinous powers of chaos. With the turn of Horus, the Warmaster, the general that the Emperor had raised above his brother Primarchs to lead the end stages of the crusade, while the Emperor returned to Terra to deal with an important matter in secret, the die was cast. Horus went on to corrupt half of the remaining 18 Primarchs to his cause. A full 9 of them went into open rebellion against their father, the Emperor. In his capacity as Warmaster, he sent most of the legions and Primarchs that he felt would never turn to chaos to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, or arranged traps and ambushes for them. When they were thus neutralized, Horus raised his banners and openly rebelled. The Horus Heresy had begun. In that war of brother on brother, legion on legion, the galaxy burned. The greater part of the strength and power of the human race was smashed, as it destroyed itself. Such tales are contained in the Horus Heresy that we cannot even begin to describe them now. Just know that the heresy went so far as to get to the very heart of the Imperium, and the forces of chaos, led by Horus, battled all the way to the Imperial Palace on Terra, the very gates of the Emperor's home. Lorgar and his legion's contribution is often derided or underestimated by the other Primarchs who had fallen, if not also by the entire community of Warhammer fans. But it was the word-bearers who gained revenge on the Ultramarines for their destruction of Monarchia decades in the past, and certainly not for their love of their old faith. It was for their own pride. On the world of Calf, they ambushed the Ultramarines and exacted a huge tithe of blood, and destroyed that world, one of the crown jewels of Ultramar, the homeworlds of the Ultramarines. It was also Lorgar and his word-bearers that performed horrific rituals that summoned a warp storm called the Ruin Storm, that cut off a huge swathe of the galaxy and prevented full 3 legions, the Ultramarines, the Blood Angels, and the Dark Angels, from assisting their loyalist brothers. In this act, months were wasted by these loyalists, believing that Horus had to have been victorious and defeated the forces headed by Rogel Dawn, the Primarch of the Imperial Fists. How lightly they took their brother's efforts. It was said storm that prevented them from arriving at Terra in force, and only permitting the Blood Angels from smashing through. As such, it was Lorgar who architected the events that led to the heroic but costly duel between Horus and the Emperor of Mankind. If you have not seen my brief introduction to Rogel Dawn, then that would be a good place to gain a brief, but I hope enlightening and entertaining overview of that which happened. But for this entry, the result was that Horus was finally killed by the Emperor. An event that saw the death of not only Horus and one of the most powerful and faithful of the Emperor's sons, Sanguinius, but the crippling of the Emperor so much so that he was forced to be interred on the Golden Throne. For the Emperor was mortally wounded, his realm in ashes, and some of his sons, the Primarchs, had been slain. The remaining Chaos Primarchs were so entrenched, so far they had fallen to chaos, that they were granted apotheosis. They were elevated to demonic princes of the Chaos Gods. Lorgar was so lauded by the powers that he did not even need to choose one to devote himself to as his brothers had. He became a vessel of what is known as Chaos Undivided, and each of the 4 gods gave him power enough to, combined, raise him to the exalted rank of a demon prince. The traitors were defeated, their legions shattered as well, and they were chased back to a place called the Eye of Terror. From there, they have marshaled their forces and sallied forth regularly and frequently into the galaxy and the Imperium, causing devastation with each of these raids until their goals have finally been met. The 13th Black Crusade, which, again, we will discuss in more detail in the future, finally succeeded and broke the encirclement the forces of the Imperium had set about it as a bulwark. When this was achieved, a mighty rent was torn through the entire galaxy, from the Eye of Terror to the furthest reaches of the Eastern Fringe. A huge warp storm, from which the traitor legions and all of their warp-spawned demonic allies can erupt at any time. The Cicatrix Maledictum. They have begun to not only raid into real space, but to start to invade it in earnest, and create entire pocket empires that are akin to hell on Earth. The time of the traitors and the mastery of the corrupting powers has well and truly dawned. While the other legions seek to dominate and to reap the entire galaxy, unshackled evil of the basest form being performed by them as not only a supplication to their benefactors, the gods of chaos, but also out of the sheer glee of it all. The Word-Bearers are the sinister force that plays an entirely different game, with an entirely different goal. The forces of the Chaos Legions are led by Abaddon, the heir to Horus, and Lord of the Black Legion, formerly the Sons of Horus. He attempts to force his way to Holy Terror and finish what his Primarch Horus could not do. He dreams of breaking the forces of the Imperium, then slowly walking up the steps to the Emperor's Golden Throne and then decapitating the Master of Mankind for his gods, but more for his own satisfaction and exoneration. Not so the Word-Bearers. They know that the present war is not one merely of men and machines, bolters and blasts. It is a struggle for the very heart of humanity and the soul of the galaxy. Never forget that the Word-Bearers are still Astartes, Space Marines, and have been augmented and empowered by their Dark Masters, so they are truly terrors on the battlefield. That said, the Word-Bearers are a cancer, a contagion that seek to spread the faith of the Chaos Gods. They know that the weapons of war are not nearly as powerful as the conviction of the Imperium, its confidence, its faith. Where the other legions would attack dockyards, barracks, and emplacements, the Word-Bearers attack the faith of the Imperium. They will target the churches, cathedrals, cardinals, and clerics of the Imperial cult. And they are winning the war of words, the struggle for the soul, for they know the weapons of their enemy better than they do. It was Lorgar who penned the Lectitio Divinatus, and they know every syllable, every context, every angle of it. By knowing this, the bedrock of the Imperial Creed, they are able to twist it and use it to corrupt their true targets, the hearts and souls of all humanity. The word-bearers are striking at the very thing that is now the only hope of humanity, the very God-Emperor of mankind. In the psychic awakening, the long-suspected truth has emerged and finally been confirmed. The prayers, the faith of the entire human race over thousands of years has collected in the warp, the spiritual realm, and has empowered that man who claimed he was not and never wished to be a god. He is now, inarguably, the god of humanity. The word-bearers know all too well, better than any have dared to dream, that to destroy the Imperium will only be possible if the god of humanity is weakened, then expunged. By removing his very fuel, his power, the devotion of his race, humanity, the word-bearers seek to sweep his legs from under him. Only then will they be able to take the stairs of the Holy Throne. Only then will they seek to approach the man who would be a god who sought to save humanity from their dark masters. Abaddon wishes to walk like a warrior toward the Emperor and decapitate him. Lorgar wishes to win the war before ever he takes the first step. Lorgar, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers, wishes to slowly process up that holy flight of steps, and then gaze into the very soul of the Emperor, to watch his father's hope finally die in his one remaining eye. For if his plans come to fruition, Lorgar knows all he will see is just a man, a broken man, a defeated man, a thing to be pitied. Pity he will not receive. For in all of the generations of humans, of all of our race to ever have drawn breath, in the setting of the grim darkness of the future, Warhammer 40k, there is no one that has ever been more evil than the Lord and Master of the 17th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers, Lorgar Aurelian. I did not waste the resources I had secured, for the Cardinal is a powerful orator. I did not waste the resources I had secured, for the Cardinal is a powerful orator. I need only break him to my use. Child's play. Of course, I had to make him see the light. I have to make him see the truth. In order to do so, I have to break him down, so I can remake him in my image. I, who is made in the image of the Golden One, Lorgar Aurelian. I must make him see the virtue of the case. I arrange for him the 4 blessings. I have my flesh crafters alter him, so he can understand the blessing and beauty of change, so he can praise the great Lord of Sinch. I have him beaten and brutalized both frequently and regularly, so he knows the inner fire of wrath and the warmth of blood, to better appreciate the great Lord Khorne. I have him pleasured in many diverse ways, so he feels the transcendence of the Prince of Pleasure, Slaanesh. I have him infected with multiple contagions, so he absorbs the need for the mercy from pain and the bounty that can only be found in the grandfather Nurgle. He now sits in a ring of mirrors, showing him his new form. His crown of a dozen eyes that surround his brow, to better appreciate his splendor. His huge distended muscles, to better serve in slaughter. His extended and engorged member, to give greater glory in his coupling. And his fast and keen mind, to understand his predicament. He weeps at the pain of the pustules and buboes that cover him like a mosaic. Beautiful. He is beautiful. Of course he weeps, but it is always darkest before the dawn. I enter the room, and his newly heightened senses immediately track my movements. He begins his last foray, his last resistance.
You may have altered my body, may desecrate my form, but you will never break my soul, for the Emperor is my shepherd.
And he shall guide and protect me. He maketh the unclean fall before me. He maketh the wellspring clean of befoulment. He raises the spirit above its worldly hardships, and awaiteth me at the end of my journey. For the Emperor be the lighthouse of my soul.
How know you the words? It pains me to hear his righteous light issue from the mouth of the unclean.
Of course I know the First Testament. It was my father who wrote it. It was my father Lorgar who penned it, before he discerned the truth, before he was enlightened.
First Testament?
Hush. You are not ready yet. First, we must discuss your present predicament. We must see where you are now, before we can discuss your enlightenment, your rebirth into the truth. You have served the Emperor of mankind. You have called him a god. Do you think he will recognize you now? Do you think he will open his arms to embrace you as you are now? Look at yourself, pitiful human. Do you even still deserve that description? I think not. I doubt even the Emperor will recognize you now, nor your soul. Why would he have such as thee befoul his paradise? You have fallen so far. You have spent your entire life, every moment, every second, on your knees in supplication to him. Yet he hath forsaken you. Look at yourself. How could all of this be permitted by the Emperor if he truly cares for you? If he is a mighty god, then he permits this. If he is not, then he is a feeble god that is not worthy of your efforts, your very soul. But I do know gods that do love you, even as you are now. I know gods that can make you whole again, can wipe away the pain, can see through the exterior and see the beauty of your inner light, can appreciate your uniqueness, can unleash your power. Prepare for the most uplifting revelation, a gift just for you. Just consider what I have said, and prepare yourself for happiness and purity like you have never dreamed possible, for it is coming, just for you. For you are gifted. You are special, and the gods I worship can recognize this and lift you up. I was sent by them to claim you. Be happy. I will leave you now to contemplate this. I smile a broad smile, a loving, warm smile at him, the only kindness he has experienced since he was delivered into my hands, and then I leave the room. It is only days away, his conversion. He will resist at first out of sheer learnt behavior, but soon he will succumb. Among his weeping and protestation that is all against his will, he will see the truth. Soon, he will be the one to change others. He will be the one that beats and bruises. He will be the one to pleasure himself and others, and he will be the one to infect others in the most profound of ways. Then, he will be ready. He will be a weapon more useful than any fleet formation or force. For I will restore his previous semblance and send him back to the Synod, fleeing an uncouth and rebellious uprising. The delay passed off so easily as an effect of warp travel. From there, he will use his gifts of oration. From there, he will bring his fellow clerics all into the flock of the true faith, and all to whom they sermon thereafter, civilians, naval officers, generals and rank-and-file guard alike, perhaps even the local order of knights. All will bend the knee to the truth. All will serve the great lords of truth, Slanesh, Zinch, Nurgle, and Khorne. This is how we win the struggle. Let Abaddon continue as a blundering, blustering distraction. Let the others play at war. For in the name of the great gods of chaos, it is we, the word bearers, who will